Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with education, even religion, manufacturing, industry, and so forth. We see every issue being connected with our economy. That's why we bring various guests in order to articulate how they relate with the economy. My name is John Masugu, and today we are going to be talking about how we develop our wellness as a nation and also how we monetize our sports, our recreation, and our arts. And to do that, we have invited the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, Mr. Nicholas Moyo, to come and help us explain what his ministry is doing in order to do all those things. Mr. Moyo, welcome to Economic Forum.
Thank you, and it's my pleasure to be hosted by you.
You know, these sections of your ministry would sound the same in one way or another, but we would want you to help unpack them. You know, sports, as how it's different from recreation, how it's different from arts, and of course, culture.
Ministry of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture. And like many people always look at arts and culture as one and the same thing. However, in our definition, really, arts is a product of culture. Culture, in simple terms, it's that way how people in a society live and carry out their duties as people. However, arts is the expression of that culture, and it's expressed through drama, theater, film, visual arts, music, dance, fashion, your food. So that's the expression of culture, which is the arts. That our mandate in the side of culture is the promotion and development of arts and culture as an industry in this country. It's very clear, it's a clear mandate. How do we bring our arts and culture in the fore and make those practitioners not just live out of it, but make those practitioners do products that are sellable, do products that are consumable, and grow the consumership of those arts and culture products. The other element in the ministry is sports and recreation. And many a time they go together, just like arts and culture. In general terms, everyone, if you say sport, people understand. We have different sport codes. You have your cricket, you have your rugby, you have your athletics, you have your badminton, you have your swimming, you have your soccer. This country, I think we have more than 70 sport codes in the country.
Do they also include Ikuni, Nodo, and others?
We call those traditional games. Traditional games, we also have a national sport association that is in charge of traditional games. However, we see those more as recreation. So they are part of the things that now fall into the recreation. Recreation, as we define it, looks at your leisure, things that you do at your spare time. It may include sport, it may include arts, things that you do really not just to while away time, but to deal with your wellness. Also, recreation deals with wellness of the employees, wellness of individuals, which our goal also as a ministry, our mandate as a ministry, is to ensure that we develop a healthy and well-up society. We push the agenda of wellness. People that are healthy, people that are well, are productive. And a productive nation is a prosperous nation. So it speaks about sports business and culture business.
You have unpacked those titles, and now let's look at the overall mission or mandate of the ministry. I think you touched some of the aspects here and there. Why is the ministry there, and what are you doing?
The general mandate is the promotion and development of sport, recreation, arts and culture, and ensuring that the products that come from the two departments is, like I said, consumable, sellable, enjoyable, but also create an economy around sport, create an economy around arts. When the president decided to split this ministry from the youth, previously it was having youth is because as a portfolio, it had just become so big. But above all, is how do we create an economy around our arts? How do we create an economy around our sport? And this is what, since we started in 2023 October, we are pushing an agenda of industrialization of our sport and industrialization of our arts.
Yes. How is that going on?
It's not an easy path. Why? Because both sports and culture are seen as social services. They are seen as people that are in the social sector. It looks so in our country. When you cross Limpopo, it doesn't look so.
Well, when we cross the Limpopo, you say sports and culture don't look that social, but I'm sure you want to say they are more into business.
They are business.
Let's talk about that, Mr. Moyo, in the second segment. That's Mr. Nicholas Moyo. He's the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture. And we are discussing all matters to do with those areas. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. In the last segment of Economic Forum, our guest here, Mr. Nicholas Moyo, who is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, you'd say that there are a number of things that are just taken as social services and people don't see that business side. But even here, Mr. Moyo, if a parent heard that you just wanted to play soccer or cricket and so forth, they would complain about that. But I don't think so nowadays, with the trend that has been set by all those who have played for leagues overseas and so forth. You wanted to explain that aspect, that besides being social services, there is a business aspect.
Things have changed. Arts, culture, and sport, they've also been in the eyes of our children. Many of the young people then will maybe start realizing their skill at a later age. So why do we want to ensure that we industrialize? It's because of what we see. In the communities, we have a lot of artists, we have a lot of musicians, we have a lot of sports personalities that are there in schools, that are there in the communities. You talk about sculptures, you see them in the communities. You go to Mfakose, you go to Mavuku, you find these young people, they are learning how to sculpt. Are we supporting them? This is where we are saying as a country, yes, Zimbabwe, ordinarily people know we are largely an informal economy. And it drives the economy of this country. It's very important that we recognize that. So when we say the arts and sport are in the social sphere, it's because most of it, again, even if when it's business, is in the formal sector. The informal sector, and our thrust as a ministry, we've been doing a lot of workshops through our NSAs, National Sports Associations, through our National Arts and Culture Associations, training people about how to cost a product, for example. You have done this piece of sculpture, how much can you cost it? Why are we doing that? We want to imbibe in our youngsters that are found in Chitungwiza, who are learning how to sculpt, to cost their product. That there is nothing for free. Any artwork that you do, someone has to pay for it. That's one thing we are doing. Second, when you look at sport, for example, we are also saying, choose whatever sport you want to do, you will make money out of it. If you participate in a marathon and come a certain position, you'll also get a prize for it. You want to go into sport, football, for example. You want to go into football, for example. How much is Messi paid for? If I pick just one name, which people know, it's millions. And then we say, how do we monetize our sports in this country? Just in South Africa, for example, it's monetized. Is it enough? Maybe not enough. If you compare with Zimbabwe, should Limpopo be the one that differentiates us so much? We are saying no. We need to inculcate within our practitioners and our society, and as a ministry and as a government, those tenets that will make us transform our sport, our recreation, our arts and culture to become business. Because as a country, we have a vision, as a ministry, we have a vision that we are running after, which is the Vision 2030 given by His Excellency. When we talk about upper middle income society, we also say there should be that money in the hands of our artists, that money in the hands of our sports people. If our sports people are now in the upper middle income, if our artists are now in the upper middle income, we have contributed to the vision of His Excellency.
But Mr. Moyo, one gets the impression that the local groups only make their money when they go overseas. Do people consume their products locally and pay them well?
Exporting is good.
Yes, it is good.
It's very important. It's very important that we support and let's make as many of our groups like Amazulu from Victoria Falls, like Oyasa from Bulawayo, like Zido Zwevanu from Fakose, the more they travel and make a mark in the international space and bring in foreign currency into the country, it's very important. Changes the livelihood of the people around those people. However, let me also say, there are many other young artists that are making huge monies locally in Zimbabwe. I've always said to people, how many times do you hear an artist like Jace Maravini being outside the country? Rarely. But Jace Maravini performs every weekend. How many times we hear Winky D, Ja Praise are going outside the country? Once or twice a year. The rest of the time, they are sold out, because the times they look and say, it's not just about going and performing, because if they go and perform outside the country, some of them are performing 1 or 2 shows. So you spend 3 days going there, preparing to perform 2 shows and come back. Well, it's when they are here, they can perform 4 or 5 days a week. So for me, what's important is, do we have statistics? And the ministry now is working on trying to get a lot of statistics in terms of our export and import. But when it comes to import and try and say, how do we minimize the importation of international artists coming into the country, because we pay more for them when they come into the country? How do we minimize the coming in of us international sports people here if they are coming to take money out of Zimbabwe? So it's trying also to balance that and make sure the sports, recreation, arts and culture also contribute meaningfully to the economy of the country, whether through import or export.
That's Mr. Nicholas Moyo. He is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture. We are discussing how these wellness issues can be monetized and also make people well so that they are productive. That's where the economic aspect comes in. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing issues to do with sports, recreation, arts and culture. And the internet is impacting on most of those things and affecting the income that is supposed to be realized. Our guest here, Mr. Nicholas Moyo, who is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, will talk to us about the impact of the internet, the coming of the AI and artificial intelligence issues, copyright. I think we want to be very clear about those.
Internet has affected the creative industry in a positive way. It has created new streams of income for our artists. What we need to do, and which we are taking it up with our National Arts Council of Zimbabwe, National Gallery of Zimbabwe, and our associations. How do we empower the sector to be ahead of these things? How do we empower the sector to take advantage of the platforms that are there. When you are home, we have a lot of socialites. They are always doing skits and putting them on TikTok, on Facebook, whatever. Many of them are now making more money from those things because of views, of likes, people comment. And we're saying to our artists, if you have good content, put it online. And as a country, we are also advocating as a ministry that when we move forward, when we make our cost for data less and affordable, it means even our local people will now be on the internet watching our local films because now it's at an affordable. So the more, the merrier. And more people watching, the more money goes into the pockets of our artists. And that's also going to address the perennial problem of artists dying as paupers, athletes dying as paupers. If they're able to realize all their resources from the sweat that they do. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was making a presentation in terms of intellectual property in the wake of AI, for example. That if we look at AI, it's a very good developmental, technological change. But how has it threatened the intellectual property? Again, the creatives become the worst affected. In Zimbabwe, with the Copyright and Neighboring Right Act, still before AI, a lot of our creatives have been suffering. Sculptors, musicians, they find their work pirated. Now with AI, it's even more. But we are saying, how can we enhance the capacity and build the capacity of our artists so that they are also ahead in these things and try and mitigate? It's the work that we are doing, and we're grateful that Zimbabwe currently will be launching the AI policy, and I think it's going to address a lot of these things. But let me say, briefly, we also saw the National Arts Council launch the film strategy last year, and the government of Zimbabwe has provided finance to build one film studio in southern region and another film studio in the northern region to allow our young filmmakers to have access to good and quality studios and bring down the cost of filmmaking in this country, with the hope that then we can increase the platforms for increased consumption of our films in this country.
How are you tapping on the traditional culture that we find in the rural areas but has not yet been scouted and discovered? Like in the past, you had a lot of the Machobane choirs, the crown figures, Moriekwa Ruizi, Moriekwa Dioko, Moriekwa Paspamire. What have we learned from those going forward as we develop our arts and culture?
Interesting is that last year we launched a program on collection of heritage property. And that is interesting. That's one of the issues that came. That how can we ensure that we collect and document some of the things that were done by our old groups, Omkadota, Omachobane, Omziligas, and Otiki, and things like that. Yes, we know National Archives has some information, but we are also saying we receive some funding from UNESCO, for example, just to help us in that area. It's something that we are seriously engaged in. But however, one of the most interesting things that we are embarking on as a ministry is to look at creating programs and products that celebrate the 16 languages that are recognized in our constitution. 16 is English, including sign language. So we are saying the 14 indigenous and sign language are going to be our focus as we ensure that some of our programs are translated and have sign language interpretation. Some of our artworks are also translated and reproduced in the other languages.
And how do you help generate interest? Because some may say, look here, some of those things are now old. We're fine with English and slang and so forth. You really have to interest, especially the young generation, to go back to protect these languages.
Surprisingly, a lot of our poetry in this country is done by young people, and they are using our indigenous languages.
Almost OGs.
It's very, no, it's
Original.
actually very, very interesting. When Chipinge last year, the young people who were doing works in their language was very shocking. And I've said the future is bright. Our young people are excited. Yes, we'll have a small group of young people. Many of those that are really going slang and want to do things differently, many of them are actually found in the affluent suburbs in either major cities. But we still have a good number that are desiring to keep the Zimbabwean flag in terms of our indigenous languages high.
And you talked about languages and those which are officially recognized. Is that all? Are there no others that were left behind?
No, they are. We have about 5. And the Ministry of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture has set up what we call a National Language Advisory Committee that is now looking at those that were left outside and how we can engage the government to also increase the number of languages that are recognized in the Constitution.
Yes. And when it comes to issue of documentation, you talked about heritage. Are people writing in order to preserve all these? Because if we don't document most of these things, then we are likely to lose them. Documenting, filming them, and enlarging or enhancing the National Archives as well as some parts of your ministry.
The ministry is busy engaged also in trying to resuscitate the publication industry in this country.
Yes, we're the Literature Bureau in the past. Yes.
So we are working in resuscitating that because it's an industry in its own. We cannot talk about a holistic economy when we leave other sectors behind. So when we resuscitate that industry, we are also pushing the documentation and the printing of physical books for heritage, for history, and also for enjoyment.
Well, that's Mr. Nicholas Moyo. He's the Permanent Secretary for Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture. And he was discussing with us here about how his ministry is helping to develop wellness using those departments as well as monetizing them so that they are not only seen as social entities but as business entities where the artists can monetize and develop themselves. What remains is to thank Mr. Moyo. He was our guest. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing your screen. If you'd like to engage with us, including some of the issues that Mr. Nicholas Moyo was talking about, you can do so on the social media platforms that again are showing on the screen. If you happen to have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can actually watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Mr. Nicholas Moyo, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, and the production crew of Economic Forum, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.